Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Welcome back to the Liberal Artist Podcast. I am your host, Bodio and With me, I have Kaylie Horowitz.
Howdy.
And Andy Gibby Gibson.
Hey.
Back in the saddle with westerns, or anime westerns, whatever. Close enough.
This is our niche now. This is who we are now, and you just need to respect that about us.
I should have worn my cowboy hat.
Yeah. Wait, do you have a cowboy hat?
I don't think I do anymore. Not one that fits me.
Hey, Hangman Adam Page taught me that you don't have to have a hat to be a cowboy.
Yeehaw.
Wow.
You just gotta kick people in the goddamn teeth.
Yep.
Oh.
That's all. Or do increasingly difficult athletic feats in order to retain the crowd's attention.
Who are you kicking in the teeth?
I don't know.
Not you.
What if I've already lost teeth from other injuries not related to being kicked in the face?
I was at the...
Nope. Shut up.
I was at the dentist earlier
Nobody cares.
today.
Nobody cares. No one cares.
And I almost brought up the story of
cares.
Kaylie losing her
No,
teeth.
shut up.
No.
Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. No one cares. Kaylie, who have you kicked in the face? That's what people are here for. That's what I'm here for.
I think I've accidentally kicked Ian in the face for tickling me without my permission, and he suffered the consequences.
Good.
That's impressive.
That's cowboy shit.
This cowboy
We're talking Trigun Stampede.
Stampede in the Gorge. Oh,
Yeah,
wait,
no,
wrong.
wrong one.
No,
wrong
never
one.
mind.
Trigun
never mind.
Stampede.
Incorrect.
The 2023 anime made by Studio Orange, who was famous for Land of the Lustrous and Beastars. There's a big taboo in the anime fan community with 3D animation.
Yeah.
They very much so dislike it because most of it hasn't been great. But Studio Orange has figured out the magic, and their series tend to be pretty good looking.
Yeah.
Especially comparatively to other stuff that has been produced.
If you watch a lot of, even if it's computer animated, two-dimensional styled animation, it's jarring, because I remember the first time I watched Beastars, I was a little it's taking me a little bit to get into this, but also the world around these characters is meshing well and is easing that transition for me, and I think it's just because the times I have seen this, it hasn't looked great,
Right.
So I'm going in skeptically and cautiously, and after 2 episodes, I'm like, oh yeah, this style. I'm loving this.
Yeah.
Great.
And they're the only studio that really, most of the time in this kind of media, when somebody uses 3D animation, it's mostly to save $1. So they use the 3D animation to emulate 2D animation, where these guys are like, no, it's 3D. Look at these crazy camera rotations and scenes we can make because of that, right?
Let's show off! Woo!
Right.
It definitely took me a second because I'm usually somebody that watches subs versus dubs. To have that little extra layer of, okay, this is different, and also this is going to be a little off because not every, mouth movement's going to be perfect. It's a lot easier in 2D animation to just be like, bop, 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 and repeat the same mouth animation over and over again.
We love flaps.
That's subtitled versus English dubbed for the uneducated. But yeah, I know I skipped halfway through watching Trigun Stampede. I started in Japanese and then I went to English just to experience what the differences were. And they brought my boy back, young Johnny.
Yes.
The king.
My boy.
Is he the only person from the original cast that's in there?
To my knowledge,
so?
unless there are other folks that are in different bit parts or something like that, because I think in the original Japanese subversion, the original VO for Vash is the radio announcer. Unless I'm getting my trivia wrong, but I don't think there were anyone else that transferred in the English dub to this new iteration of the show.
Yeah,
but they had to have the boy.
Of course, it's Johnny Young Bosch. This was the role, if I remember my timeline correctly, he did Akira first because that was 80s. But this is like his first mainstay role in an anime, and this was sort of what a lot of people consider the launching point for his career.
This is kind of what he did after he got out of or the next big thing he did after he got out of Power Rangers.
Yes, yeah. And he's said before, like, this was a character that like really did mean a lot to him because of that very unique philosophy that Vash has in his like nonviolence, like love and peace, pacifist mentality. And so this has become like he's gone on to do so many other great things. He's been doing Bleach for ages, but like this was always for me that like I love listening to you in Bleach just because I love you as a voice actor and I love like hearing how you work through characters. But this is just such a good, clean, tight package of a character with an arc, and you do it so well. And having him back in the saddle again,
It also is pretty easy to work because Vash is kind of like an ageless character. Like,
but
you do see him as like a child and a teenager, but for the most part, we're seeing him, you know, as an adult who's also 100, 200 something years older. So
150 or 130, depends on what you're viewing.
Yeah,
I know too much Trigun lore and my head hurts.
You don't look a day over 100.
So, you know, we're going to talk the normal stuff, aesthetics, themes, music, all that good stuff. I have many umbrages. I have so much negative to say.
Don't worry. I'm here to counter that because I'm a little wishy-washy bitch and I'm going, if you can tell a good story and it looks nice and I'm invested, you get a thumbs up from me.
I don't want to. I'm going to say a lot negative, like preamble. I'm going to say a lot negative. I don't want people to think I hate Trigun Stampede. I think it's pretty okay. So, I don't know what to talk about first. Music. Music is easy. I hate sadboi music.
It is so frustrating, and I think this critique carries over to aesthetically how I feel a lot about this interpretation of the story. And it's tough because we are coming from like a week ago going, Trigun 98, we had so much fun. It was such a good time. The music, fucking rocks. And like take something and do it very different is kind of a whiplash effect.
Sure.
I think the music kind of is our first big introduction to how the aesthetic of this show is going to be. And yes, it's real sad boy hours up in here. Our fucking power rock and roll has been replaced by like, I wasn't going to say TikTok music. I'm going to say
TikTok music.
Like,
no, it is TikTok music. It's fake ass Frank Ocean wannabe Bad Bunny bullshit. It sucks. I hate it.
I was gonna say lo-fi anime hip-hop beats to study to.
Lo-fi anime hip-hop beats to cry to and walk aimlessly in the desert with.
I mean, sure, but also the opening, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's the same kind of iconography that the original opening has, sound-wise, but this, I think this and Chainsaw Man have been in watching anime recently, like within the last 4 years, I'm like, this is the most excited I've been for an anime
Kaylie,
opening.
it's just sand.
No, okay, visually sure, but just music.
It's rough and it gets everywhere.
Sure. I was actually really surprised that I really enjoyed this soundtrack more than I thought I was going to, because I agree there is a generating, like, we gravitate towards a specific kind of sound in like contemporary anime and like something like Chainsaw Man goes, nah, fuck that, we're gonna be kind of punk and rock and edgy and like be a little bit louder with things. And I think there is a level of like that sad boy lo-fi quality and like cyberpunk, cyber synth kind of style in this. But I think that lends itself towards the idea that overall Stampede is looking at, instead of being a Western, the idea of the frontier and the West is the background, while this like dystopic cyber-ish drama plays out. So I think that's where that music fits into that a little bit more.
We can transition directly into that. Then
the music is the perfect intro for that.
We're going a mile a minute, just like Trigun Stampede. But I have umbrage with, I've thought a lot about the setting of Trigun Stampede. So it's the same planet, same time period, just a slightly alternate reality, a slightly alternate storytelling.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about characters a little later, put that to the side. But fuck whoever's idea it was to kill Billy. I hate you.
She's not dead.
She's not there, though. Instead, we
but
get
that
Roberto.
Doesn't mean she's dead.
Instead, we get Roberto De Niro. Ooh.
Okay, he's not my top choice either, but he's okay.
No, fuck, no, he sucks. He's boring and he's stupid.
Just because they give a nod in the final episode to be like, you've got a new partner, a newbie named Millie. It's just like, no.
Suck my dick.
Give us tall girl.
But the aesthetic, they're the background.
We all agree she's best girl, most wholesome character, but that doesn't mean she's dead. Anyways.
I do not like what the choice they made with the background, right? Because what Trigun 98 and what the manga depicts, right, is a world on the rise. Sure, it's a cruel world, and sure, it's it's dystopic in a sense, in that, you know, humans ran away from Earth and landed on planet Gunsmoke, and Gunsmoke's kind of unlivable if it weren't for the plants. But whereas Trigun 98 in the manga presented a world on the rise, albeit a slow one, Trigun Stampede depicts a world in decay. Which, given, like I said, I have too much Trigun lore in my brain. Given it's only been 100 years, y'all, how are you already in decay? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so here's, I'll get back to aesthetics in a second, and I think genre is worth talking about as well. But I think the biggest thing about the plot and, story of this series is that the first 12 episodes of this are taking
There are only 12 episodes, Gibby.
Yeah. Well, I assume there's going to be another season.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers uncrossed.
No.
It feels like this is a show that there's going to be more to it. So we may be judging a portion of it versus the entirety of what the creators have in mind.
Sure.
But what we've seen so far is essentially a prequel in that it's the full extent, at least in this interpretation, of Vash's tragic backstory. That we have taken our direction in a very different way. Because in the original series, what we see of Vash's backstory comes in flashbacks, those of which that we don't really start to get until 6 episodes in, and then not again until 12 episodes in, and then so on and so forth. We don't get his backstory and everything that happens with Project Seeds and the spaceships, yada yada, until halfway through the series. In this one, we take it from the opening images that we see are the introduction of Vash's backstory.
Everything that we kept in suspense in the last iteration, we're going to give you that right away. So even if our new characters don't know what's going on, you, the audience, are at least somewhat clued in.
Yes.
There's still going to be some reveals, but just so you've got some bases covered. There you go.
Which is why I think it changes the tone of the story that they're trying to present. I totally agree with you that Trigun 98 shows a world on the rise. Trigun Stampede shows a world stumbling right before the rise that we love. And
I
are
completely
used to.
disagree.
No, I think so though, because again, the idea of cycles is so much more present in Stampede
I completely
than
disagree.
it is in 98 to me, because I think 98 is very honed in on the structure and storytelling, like the idea that cycles are there, but the sort of the rise and the fall, and then it makes sine waves at Trigun 98 as opposed to full circle, and like in what it wants to focus on, because that's kind of what the Western does. The Western knows things aren't always going to be stable, things aren't always going to be good, but they're not always going to be bad either. They're going to be on the up and up. Whereas here, we are so much more focused in, because we're starting earlier. We're starting like 130 years before humanity, like before we would have met Vash for the first time wandering through towns. We're starting at the crash. We're starting at Project Seeds, landing into Gunsmoke. Kind of. But it's that, like, we're starting there and we're already getting these ideas of, like, we've just failed on our last planet. Like, we failed Earth. We had to leave. This has been 200 years in the making of hoping for a new start. And we see them succeed, and then the plants start dying or the plants start disappearing. Humanity is getting, like, the worst of humanity is coming back out as just as much as the best of humanity is coming out to help those in need. And it is continuously cycling on itself as it's trying to move forward.
I want to push back on two things we've said so far. A, that we start at the beginning, and B, that we see a world on the rise. We have to remember that we are coming in to Trigun Stampede with the context of what's going on.
Sure.
Somebody who comes into Trigun to Stampede without the context of what's going on sees all the stuff fall onto the planet, sees all the spaceships fall onto the planet, and has no idea what any of that means.
Sure. I think there's the argument that you could put some pieces together, but yes, like there's still not a, like, I mean, I'm assuming that one of these little blondies turned into this blonde.
Sure,
maybe I don't know.
I don't think anybody's. I
have you watched an anime before?
Exactly. You hit something that I want to go that'll hit near the end of our conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
But I also want to play to the viewers, the top of the viewers' intelligence. It's not right to assume that people watching are stupid. But at the same time, without the context of what we have, right? Without the context of knowing that lore and that backstory, seeing those scenes doesn't really mean anything. It just kind of is like, oh, there's space stuff going on. Second,
space opera.
We don't see the rise. We skip to a dip in the sine curve, right? Because we hard skip to Vash upside down, tied up, going to a town he's been through, and one of their plants are dead. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the idea that I want to immediately push back on the idea that we've given you all the information at the top, and then we just go, and the idea that we ever see the rise of this world, because we don't.
But I also don't know if we ever see the rise truly in 98. Like, we see where things are on. Like, we see that there's a much more hopeful idea that they're continuing to be on the rise, but it's still that level of the things that look nice and shiny on the outside. With every filler episode, we learn there's something corrupt and there's something more dark underneath that's eating itself alive.
Of course.
That we have to stop.
I think that my main point to that argument is Trigun Stampede is an anime full of abandoned towns. Whereas Trigun 98 is an anime full of populated towns where we meet these nice characters of the day. And sure, there's something wild going on. There's bandits, there's robots in the end, there's people who are impoverished, but they are still going. Whereas in Trigun Stampede, we get to a town and everybody's gone except for the kid who was turned to a monster. We get on the train and there's no city around the train station. It's just the station, right?
Yeah. Which, again, I don't know if that's sort of in this series approach to plants are disappearing, not just that they're not being maintained, but like something
Yeah.
is actively taking them away from the people that have been needing them to survive. So it's that question of like, is this the sign of that, or is it just like more ruin for the sake of destruction and ruin and Mad Max
what
aesthetics?
It is, and I'm going to repeat this a lot, kind of my big overture, right? My big 10-mile flyover of Trigun Stampede was, we tried to make Trigun more into the seasonal anime. Here's 12 episodes. I hope you tweet about us, right? Very generic, very flyover, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, right? But we genericized Trigun. We tried to flatten it out to match what else has come out, what anime is in the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is dystopia, world on the fall.
Dystopia or futuristic cybertech.
Yes, exactly, right? So it's taking the aspects of Trigun and doing their best to match it to that, which I don't appreciate as much as Trigun 98, and I'll keep talking about it as we go, right?
I agree with you there. I think one of my central core complaints is that, yes, I feel that it becomes a little too similar to what's around it coming out in anime within the last couple of months and years, that stylistically it matches more of those tones versus something like 98 is kind of an independent. Like, I know it's still stylistically similar to other things, but there's not a lot of spaghetti western anime out there. And I think that kind of changes the tone and, the style of things. One of them appeals to me more than the other. 98 appeals to me more because there's more presence of hope.
Yes.
And that we're going somewhere. Stampede it just left me feeling sad all the time, and I don't like that.
Sure.
It was a constant feeling of like 1 step forward, 2 steps back for the people.
Nobody
that are
laughs
living
in
this
this show.
No, and I think that's one of the bigger problems for me, and like sort of tangentially related to character development and this idea of compression, is that like, for as much as Trigun 98, like I love it, but it is to me one of those like, God, 60% of this feels like filler, and we're getting threaded little clues in at least just about every episode, but I still feel like I'm just sort of here with these characters, and we're getting great moments of interaction with them, and we're getting to see multiple like sides of them and all these different personality traits come out that we do certainly lose in Stampede, which is like sad. But at some level, there's a question that I wonder of like, sure, if you've never seen the original, here's your first introduction for it. I think you're certainly missing a lot. But if you do know this, there's a level of like, I'm assuming because they were only given 12 episodes.
Yeah.
They kind of had to go, well,
what can we do in 12 episodes?
You know what these characters are, like who they are to one another, what their roles are in story. But I agree, that doesn't necessarily make it better that we don't have some room to play, to laugh, to have these moments of levity before diving back into the next meh.
I'm going to let Gibby say what is on the tip of his tongue before I say what I want to say.
I'm very mad that they took my silly boy and they made him a TikTok rapper.
They like
took
the look.
Bugs Bunny and they made him into a SoundCloud boy.
We'll talk about characters.
Yeah.
I'm not even that. It goes in with tone. I'm not talking about like the look of it. I'm saying that they took Vash's range of emotions, and they shrunk it down so much that it only gravitates between very sad and sheepish.
Yeah. I was thinking we were onto something with like the first 4 episodes, because we did get some really nice flips of like, we meet him strung upside down
and
like
laughing,
just, man, I'm starving.
Fun.
Like, that's Vash. That is Vash the Stampede. And I agree. I'm sad that we didn't get more of those opportunities. Like, just to have those, like, two-sidedness. Like, how can this be the same person? Like, from the top of this arc, like, just coming into town, not a care in the world, and telling himself that I don't deserve to cry. That's why I'm not allowing myself to. Like,
Bash is a crier. He's a sweet boy.
I know. Well, and it's that I was willing to, like, go with that because I know that there's moments like in 98 again, it's the, like, crying goofy tears because that's just how you do anime expressions. But the moments of, like, actual tears were these more often than not sincere moments, like, not just the, like, overreactions that he would have to things or to try to make somebody else feel a certain way.
Like when after Wolfwood dies, how he, like, tries to cheer himself up, but he can't even enjoy his favorite food, and he just breaks down in the middle of the town square.
Like, those are the sort of moments where it's the, like, no, these are tears. Like, he's been crying because that's how you express things in this medium, like, to just get that idea across. But
if we never get to see the boy at his happiest, we're not going to appreciate when things are serious or when things are sad in the same way. Like,
I want to ask,
Mad.
I want to bring it to the table.
Mad.
Because Kaylie brought up something I think is a good point, especially for, like, if you're just getting into anime in the last 2, 5, 10 years, just like the quick pace of it, right? A lot of the new popular anime comes in burst of 12 episodes, 10 episodes, 8 episodes, so they do have these mile a minutes. I want to ask about how you feel about a lot of these moments feel like filler, right? Versus the compliment we gave to Trigun 98 is that there's so much niceness in the small, quiet moments, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you compare those two ideas?
I didn't realize this until I was doing the research on this and just, like, making sure that I also had my lore straight of, like, was this supposed to be this part of it, or was this, or are we separate? Okay, sure. But I hadn't realized this is not a repeat exactly, but we're treading very close, and it's why I'm continuing to hold out hope for Stampede. Yeah. We're treading very close to that territory of Full Metal versus Full Metal Brotherhood, because I didn't realize the manga wasn't done when Trigun 98 came out.
I'm furious about that.
I didn't know that. And so, like, I think that's kind of my problem with it, is that it's suffering the same thing that every anime studio that was trying to just get the jump on what could be the next big series, but, like, pulling the trigger too soon, and like, oh god, what do we do now? Because we don't know where we're going, so we either have to literally stall the production studio, or we just have to put something out because we're only getting 26 episodes, and we'll just have to write this thing out and do all these plot modifications that, like, 98 simultaneously, I think, does a better job than most anime of that time was doing, where it's at least, if we're gonna be fillering, let's give us something to filler about. Like, actually having these, here's a side of this character that we haven't seen yet, or let's explore Millie and Wolfwood more, like, as a dynamic, as a couple, because we've seen her and Meryl, we've seen her and Vat. Like, let's set up these different pairs. Let's get some different ways to reveal things about this character that will enrich it. But the situation in which we're doing that is not necessarily relevant to the plot. And it's that, like, another town, another problem that's going to be solved at the end of this episode. I've seen this formula before.
Or Stampede does the same thing, though. Another town and another abandoned town with another abandoned monster.
Yeah, you can tell, though, that there is a little bit more of a drive, like, I think sooner, and again, it's compressed, but sooner in that plot structure, like a quarter, like, we're getting that call to action pretty quick after we're just sort of kicking it in this town going, what are we going to do? Here's the call to action. We've got to get to July. We got to go east.
Remind me why they go to July, because I think I missed that and I was very mad.
It's, if I remember correctly, it's the recognition that they're, like, something is happening to these plants.
Does Knives tell Vash I'm going
Yeah,
to
like
July?
it's that like, yeah, come meet me, find me here kind of idea.
Because I think I missed that part, and I was super mad about it. Because the only reason July is relevant to anything Trigun is, that's where Vash
we gotta
exploded.
blow it up.
Well, yeah, that's where he became the humanoid Stampede. But in this version, he's already the humanoid Stampede, although he's not. They fucking nerfed our humanoid Typhoon. Sorry. Vash the Stampede, the humanoid Typhoon. They treat Stampede like it's his last name. Right. I didn't like that.
That is an odd little change with dialogue right there.
Let's transition to never mind.
To finish that thought, like that there's some good things that they do with that filler opportunity that we don't know how the story's going, so we're going to have to rewrite it, but we've got these episodes to stall, so let's at least do something. And I think this one is trying to, it's not copying the manga exactly. Like, again, we're getting a third different branch of storytelling that's trying to sit in between the two. And here we're going, let's make up for the fact we didn't have a plot that was finished by, even though we're pressed for time because studios only get these greenlit 12 season, maybe 18 or 12 season, the season of 12 episodes, or maybe 18 or 15. Yes. And that's just a cost benefit bullshit that most studios are willing to give. Yeah. Which is shitty.
It's dumb.
Because I'm like, with 6 more episodes, and I think this could have been fucking perfect. But they didn't have that. But for what they were able to do, going, this is how we're going to have to compress it, I'm actually really happy that it was now like, we can weave a pretty complex plot together and still have it all make sense. It sucks that the thing that we're losing out of that, though, is all of these great little character moments and opportunities to just sit with them. But I'm kind of glad that we're getting more plot into this world rather than just Western cowboy cyber world. As the vibe. This is one thing I want to say before we transition, is just that this is a choice of a story to start in a pre-July disaster world versus a post-July disaster world. And that's going to change the perspective on everything that we witness with this. Because maybe those character moments are going to happen later. We can't. It's that, like, I think you're making us want to treat this as a prequel to the reboot of what we already know. And I hope you're not just being dicks and teasing us that idea. I hope that is actually where we're going to go with this.
Give us Millie, goddammit.
Give us Millie!
I'm going to say something that only Kaylie understands. Then Gibby will be left out of it. Trigun Stampede is to Trigun not what Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is to Full Metal Alchemist the manga, but more like what the Soul Eater anime is to the Soul Eater manga.
Yes.
Yeah. For context, Soul Eater. Yeah. See, Gibby didn't know.
We've gone very weeb, very quick. Super weeb.
So the Soul Eater is a anime / manga that was really popular around the 2010s.
It's good. Go check it out.
It's fun. It's very fun. I like it. I love it. But it had a 60 episode anime that ended maybe a year or two before the manga did. So they invented their own ending. Which is more satisfying than the manga's ending, but that's neither here nor there.
Spicy.
Yeah, right.
So to Kaylie's point, Trigun 98 did the same thing, and Stampede might be setting up for something. I don't know what they'll do because we're transitioning into story.
Wow.
We've hovered over it in theming and whatnot, but it's fine.
Like, it's hard to talk about the themes in the setting without story.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing, honestly to its detriment, but they tried something cool and I like it. The most interesting thing Stampede did was it took the story beats that 98 either didn't care about or didn't have yet and tried to craft a story around that. So when we talk about that, right? So the baseline, all right, Trigun lore time. Play the old timey music as we
lore dump.
So we already know, if you listen to our last Trigun episode, that Planet Seeds, Earth got fucked up. They came
Wally.
to... Yeah,
Wally.
They crash landed on planet Gunsmoke. Rem saved all the humans when Knives was trying to kill them all. And Vash and Knives ran around together for 20 years until Vash shot Knives, and then they were separate for 80 years. The lore piece that 98 left out and that Stampede kind of builds itself on is in that 80 years while Vash was running around helping humanity and making friends and just like seeing the world Rem wanted built, Knives created a cult.
Yep.
Right.
So there's a cult to Knives because of fucking course there is.
Of course.
And these guys have done all kinds of anime genetic magic. We've made super soldiers, we've made monsters, and we're also vaguely Christian.
Worm child.
Right.
Worm
Yeah.
boy.
It's the... I'll go ahead and say this. There's a lot of generic anime pieces to Trigun.
Sure.
That...
There's a lot of that, like, here's this angel and, like, some Christian symbolism, like, conversation.
This guy is cool,
like...
not because of his training. My least favorite aspect of any anime thing ever. This guy is cool, not because of his training, not because he works hard, but because he's a super soldier with extra special powers.
Right.
Right. And 98 left most, if not all of that out. Whereas Stampede builds itself on that stuff. We go into the what is Wolfwood a priest of? He's a priest of the Knives cult. Why are these guys really good with guns? Do they train? No, they're super soldiers. There are other plants like Vash and Knives running around, which is actually cool. And I hope if they get a second season, they go into that because those characters are neat.
Yeah.
And again, I don't value those kind of things because I've been watching anime for like 20 years now. And it's like all those pieces.
You get a little jaded to certain tropes.
And
for every show, that you get jaded by, that's some newbie's that's some newbie's first introduction to it, and they go, oh, what, like, oh, the bad guy is, like, they each have, like, one angel wing, but the bad guy's in all white, and the good guy's all black. Whoa, like,
that's crazy.
We've seen it a dozen times, but it's always going to be somebody's first, and yeah, it does look cool, but yes, I've seen this in 10 other anime. It's not the only one.
You know, I just went, oh, Sephiroth. Great.
Right.
Cool. They're twin Sephiroths.
Yeah.
Super.
There we go. That's it.
But they do take some characters who, like two. There's like two characters who show up in the manga who didn't have time to show up in 98. The main one being Livio, who we'll talk about characters and character designs later. Livio being a big character in the manga, but didn't show up at all in 98.
Yeah, they had to just write him out of 98 because they went, we don't know how to include him at this point. Sorry.
Who is this guy? Why are his guns 2 mini crosses? That's stupid as hell. He doesn't exist.
Yeah, I just, like, with some of the choices with story, I kind of think, one, this is what everybody else is doing, and two, what did this add exactly? Like, I know that because I looked at the subreddit, there's a significant amount of people that go, it's more accurate to the original manga, which makes it better.
Kind of.
And
sort of.
Sure.
That's an argument.
Yeah, there are people that go, that was in the manga, therefore this is better than that. But there are some things that I'm just like, you spent time with this. Did this improve how we view the story? For instance, when we get the whole backstory and we change to 2D animation for the backstory of Livio and Wolfwood, does doing that like 3 times really make that huge of an impact?
Sure.
The first time.
Can it just be the first time, like, yeah, I get it. Like, you get it. like, what does doing it several more times add to this other than to say, hey, look what we can do? Like, I think that the show subjects itself to wanting to show off what they can do with the power of modern technology to the detriment of the overall story, you know? And even to, like, action within episodes where it's like the first time you see them change the virtual camera inside there and do a lot of crazy angles and stuff, it's like, wow, this is pretty neat. And then you get that again with different characters, but not really that dynamically different. I don't want to be a super pessimist about all of this, but I think it just has diminishing returns with the ways it chooses to tell the story or smaller tales within each episode.
Visually, I don't agree that it gets more boring. I think visually the show is stunning. Like, I'll give it that.
Good fucking God. It's beautiful.
It is a pretty show.
It could just be a preference thing for me.
Like, and this was always one of those things that, like, I could appreciate about 98's animation style and just the genre that it was. Like, I have in my notes that I say 98 is a Western with future tech. Like, but it's primarily a Western. Stampede is desert waste sci-fi. Like,
it's
the
sci-fi
background
for
is
certain.
the background is the desert, but just because we're in the desert does not mean we can make it beautiful.
Yeah.
Whereas a Western is that, like, this is a vacuum of life amongst the wildness and the harshness of everything outside that's going to kill you. Whereas Stampede is still looking at, like, it's going to kill you, but kind of in this conversation of, like, what is beautiful about something that can be destructive, like humanity. It is what is beautiful about something that can kill you in this environment. Like, really just gorgeous visuals.
I mostly agree. I agree with most of what you said, in that most of Stampede is just us driving in an open desert in the car, and that bothers me. But outside of that, yeah, it's very the animation and the art style are great. I think the direction of the action scenes is very good and very, very fluid. Watching the weird kung fu that they decided to go with, which I have umbrage with, but it looks good. It looks very, very cool.
No, I think, like, there's a lot to me in the story that, like, yes, I agree. There are moments where it's that, like, we've got to hit these beats because we're trying to cover ground that wasn't previously tread. Like, we're going to take this opportunity to look at things that weren't looked at in an animated form before. Sometimes at the cost of losing other, like, smaller bads along the way. Like, oh God, his name is slipping my mind, but the one that Vash he puts himself in front of him as like, you have to kill
Legato.
me. Yeah, Legato. Like, we get flashes of him during that montage, but we don't get truly introduced to him in this iteration, which sucks, but I also hope that means in a season 2, we will get that confrontation.
He's a fuckboy in 98 and is a fuckboy here. I didn't think I could dislike that character more until I saw his design in this shit, and I immediately just wanted to punch him in the nose. I was like, no, fuck this guy.
But like, I wanted to finish, like, for story, like, for as much as, like, we had to, like, pick and choose our losses of, like, which ones to include and how and what is that doing to the story, and, like, sometimes it's flowing really well, and then suddenly it kind of gets real, like, choppy and jerky of just, like, what? We're here, oh, this, and flashback, and this, and we go. And then we're going again, and it's making sense. But overall, I think because of how it's able to connect and relate pieces of things that are going to start important at the beginning and become relevant again at the end, or however the puzzle pieces all connect, that the themes read a lot more clearly as to why we have these two sides having this argument that can't agree.
Are you talking about Nye and Vash or Vash and Wolfwood?
Nye and Vash, but also, like, these elements of like, what is power truly, like, in this kind of a world, what is power or what is human in this question when survival is at stake? Like, what does it mean to have humanity, and how is that exhibited? Because we get to know so much more about why Nye is the way he is, and like his philosophy against Vash.
I think we're conflating story and plot.
Yeah.
Whereas
potentially, we have this
I
argument every other week.
We do, and we talk. And the reason it's in my head is because
it's hard.
Yeah, off the pod, we were talking about this with some friends yesterday. But I think the theming and everything lands in story.
Sure.
Whereas what we are describing, and I think what Stampede will ultimately have an easier time with, is plot. Like, I think to go back to what we were talking about, I think filler helps story, whereas it hinders plot, as opposed to the other way around. And I think when you make
but themes aren't part of plot, which is why I say that in this, those themes are coming through much more strongly.
Yeah. It's that balance of them.
Yeah, and I think this gave me a reason to like actually make sense of Nye's argument, and not just from this perspective of, you had a shitty interaction with one person on this ship, and now you want to kill all of humanity. Whereas here, we're getting this much more like threaded through. Here's what compounded for like they were kids, like they're not human, but they're still kids. Here's what compounded for them over this course of development, and then culminates in this like traumatizing moment for both of them for various reasons, like this explosion, this expulsion to Gunsmoke. Like the themes of what is starting this conflict between these two that goes on for more than a century, like, reads so much more clearly to me in this iteration than it ever did just through flashbacks. I think that's the product of
us seeing more knives in this version as opposed to 98,
I think so too,
which I do appreciate.
Rather than just him being in like reconstruction for the whole show.
Kaylie and I talked about this last week. Knives' whole thing is people are mean and they're rude, and given to themselves, they will blow each other themselves up, and
this
they're
guy,
not worthy.
Brad, is an asshole.
Right.
Fuck him.
Fuck everything like him. But we talked about this last time, Kaylie. It's like, yeah, the humans are like this, but it's because you keep fucking with them, Knives.
Right, like
like if you left them alone for a couple decades,
it's the guy sticking the stick in the bicycle wheel. Who could have done this? Fucking Brad.
Okay, so here's my question with good old Knives. Excuse me, Nye, which they
Millions
are very
knives.
specific on, just like consistently through the whole show, except when he's given himself an edgy nickname.
Right.
They're just Nye.
He is Knives. Like I have umbrage with the sub translators. I'll talk about it later. Keep going.
Okay. I think here's my question.
Yeah.
What do you think is more effective for story? The motivation of the Knives that we are given in the 98 version, who is pretty directly a psychopath and sticks with that, or somebody like in the Stampede version who has psychopathic tendencies but gets proof to his argument in the scene of when he explains to Vash that the humans are demanding too much and abusing the plants, and gives him a tiny bit of credence to his standpoint. Which do you think is more powerful?
I don't think either is more powerful than the other. I'm sorry, I totally ducked your question. That's such a dick move. I'm sorry. but I don't think one is better than the other. I think they're just different in their intentions and in their obviously in their execution. I think it's a question of do you want your villain to drive story, or do you want your villain to be a plot device? Whereas
which one do you think
Stampede
to?
Knives drives story. Knives builds the
Yep.
themes of good and evil, or the classic good versus evil. In 98,
Right.
Knives is a plot
But he
device.
actually,
Knives rushes
but like this
to
one
the
is
end.
actually giving you a reason for like why there is an argument for this side of wiping out humanity. Because to me, how are you going to side with that in 98? However,
but you're not
I really
supposed
like.
to.
No, you're not supposed to, but it's also that like if you're sitting in this question of like what do you choose when you're starting over? Like to me there's this sort of like underlying like clearly there's a moral bias of like, yeah, I wouldn't want to get wiped off the face of the earth. I'm a human. I'd like to live. But sort of in this vein of we are trying to avoid falling into the same mistakes that ruined the last planet we were on. There is perhaps this idea of, well, if we're seeing these tendencies, do we nip this in the bud before it can carry on any longer and we start over because we haven't gotten that far anyways? Or do we hope it gets better and let it keep going?
Here's my thing. I don't think I'm going to even think that deeply about it because, like, the beginnings of the stories and our introductions to our villain are kind of set up in the same way. Here's, like, the equivalent of a 9-year-old who decides to try to kill all of humanity.
Knives is an abject
left.
evil. Like, there is
He's
no
an
good.
abject evil.
Yeah.
And I find it way harder, like, afterwards for him to be like, no, wait, hear me out. No, buddy.
Yeah.
You're laughing about killing millions. Like, at that point, I have cut it off completely where it's like, I'm not even going to give thought to any position that he has or any theme. He is the evil. And maybe it's the stupid asymmetrical haircut they give him in this version.
I will say, the weird
hold on.
floppy
I need
child
my
hair
30
is-
seconds to rant.
Let him cook.
Let him cook.
I need to turn up the burners real quick.
Okay.
There's a couple things that I hate. Really fucking stupid haircuts on characters. They took these weird but goofy spiky little haired kids and they turned them into fucking Tumblr posters. And I like Tumblr, but like don't do that to a 9-year-old. That's basically abuse. And also, instead of having adults voicing kids, it's pretty obvious that they brought some kids in, and this is a personal beef, so don't give too much like to this argument. I hate the voice of child actors. Kids are great. I just hate listening to child actors. It spurted like that sprouted up from when I have to like see a play that a kid is in and they're using a voice that's not really how a kid talks, and it's really uncanny valley. It's a personal beef and now you know about it. So really, Nye never had a chance in this version.
He never stood a chance.
So now you can see that every time I've tried to be objective, I've actually been subjective all along. I'm a phony, I'm a fraud, and these stupid asymmetrical haircut children finally exposed that. I yield my time.
Do we want to use that to transition to talking about the characters as much as we can?
Sure.
Yeah.
No.
I think there's more to talk about in the design of the characters than there is in personalities, because again, like I said earlier, my big gripe with Trigun Stampede is that it feels like they homogenized Trigun. It feels like they put it in, if we're gonna keep the let him cook saying go, right?
They didn't let it cook for long enough.
Or the exact opposite. They let it cook for too long. They took what rose to the top, and they just took the skin off, and they were like, that's an anime. Right? So you boiled down...
I said...
Right, you boiled down a lot of these characters just to their, like, their Cliff Notes dots, right? Vash, sad and lonely. Wolfwood, kind of a jerk. Millie, blindingly hopeful. I hate what they did to not Millie, Meryl. They didn't put Millie in there. Sorry. I'm hopeful. I wish Millie was here.
Freudian slip.
Right. I miss my girl.
Nye, basic anime villain with scary weapon and stupid
Nobody
outfit.
uses guns. Nobody uses guns in this shit. I'm bothered by that.
I will say I'm a little bothered by that.
I'm taking the card and taking a left turn. You agreed with me, so I'm sorry for interrupting you. I don't like that nobody uses guns in this anime called Trigun. Knives has
try the gun.
Right, try the gun. Shoot somebody. So we could talk about. Sorry, I hit my mic again. We could talk.
Stop doing that.
I'm sorry. We can talk about how they nerfed my boy Vash by 1,000-fold. He used to be the $60 billion double dollar man.
Well, he is at the end. Now, they nerfed him to 6 million first.
To 6 million.
It's a prequel.
And he does nothing to prove that he's worth $6 million double dollars. Right?
Yeah.
There's so many moments in the action scenes where they choose to do this weird fake ass kung fu as opposed to Vash being a gunman, because they took the Vash's I don't kill people right to the extreme, and it's like, oh, he's a pacifist, so of course he doesn't shoot anybody, which I'm like, no, that's not the case.
No.
Vash will shoot you in the shoulder, treat the wound, and then take it to the doctor, but he won't kill you. Whereas instead we get this weird guy who punches and kicks while he has his gun in his hand for no reason. You're
not allowed to shoot people. You're allowed to shoot bullets.
Yeah, I was
and
so
obstacles.
Blindingly angry in the first episode when Vash has to shoot the RPG, which first off doesn't make any sense. But when he has to shoot the RPG,
it looks cool.
It does look badass. I'm not gonna lie. He shoots the RPG, and the way they stretch out that scene is that they're like, oh, Vash forgot he doesn't have any bullets. Vash the Stampede would never forget he doesn't have bullets. He would never not have bullets. He's a gunsman. He works so hard to be good at shooting and using a gun that it's fucked up his own body. The idea that he's like, oh God, does anybody have a 22 millimeter round? I was like, fuck this guy. Fuck this fuck boy. I hate him. I want to punch him.
I get that it's a younger version, but just because you have a younger
he's 130
Batman doesn't mean he's completely incompetent.
Ooh, yeah, you jumped on something. I had issue with.
This is what you guys had teased before. I said something about Batman and Superman last time.
We talked a lot about in 98 how capable the characters are and how they all work. We have proof that they work diligently to be capable adults. None of that is here in Stampede. Nope. Vash is special because he's supposed to be. One of my favorite scenes in 98 is the cold opening we get when Vash wakes up and he talks about meditating and he gives up in 3 seconds, and we see him practicing his quick draw with the egg.
Yeah.
That teaches us, oh, Vash isn't just this good because he has to be. Vash is this good because he has trained himself. And then
he puts in the work.
And that also accelerates everybody around him, because when we see Millie and Meryl keep up with Vash, that means they've also trained well. When we see Wolfwood keep up with Vash, that means he's also well trained.
Sure.
In this version,
instead of some genetic freak who's not normal.
He's a 9-year-old. He's just a 9-year-old who's got steroids. Also, that means him and Millie can't get together anymore because that's statutory. I don't like that. And I don't like that they turned Meryl. The solution to make Meryl more anime was to make her younger and change her occupation to something more generic.
And to make her a sidekick.
No, I agree. Like, there's a lot that is just kind of like we've chopped them from the knees in some ways and don't really give them much to stand on compared to Trigun 98.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that kind of helps in some of the ways that this version
How so?
is going about its story. Because, again, thinking by the end of the, like, 'cause by that last episode, I'm sort of going like, why? like we've missed so many things. Like these characters didn't just do really anything until this moment. Like that's why Meryl had to be here, was for this moment. But the recognition that like, well, of course that's why, because if we're, again, this is me being hopeful and optimistic, if we're setting up for this idea that Stampede is the like prequel, like first chunk to whatever iteration of the original quote unquote that we're gonna get in the next part, like post July Destruction. Yeah, this is what will have jaded some characters or have helped re-perspect and refocus the mentality of other things. Like I'm like, I know, I'm like, training aside, I don't know how you kind of reckon that. I agree to some extent of like, no, it's more exciting to have a character that has worked for these things, not necessarily just been given the super soldier like freebie card. But at the same time, it's that like, I would hope the next time we see Vash, like we know that he ends, spoilers, as Eric's. We're finally getting that like, I'm running away from this because I can't be myself. I have to die. I have to take myself out of this. But I hope that something kickstarts that that the world is made of love and peace. Like having have gone through these things with or without the preparation or the like correct sort of mindset, that making those mistakes, making those different choices is what gets us to that more optimistic and or purposeful actions of the characters to come. That like Meryl, having been the naive, like on like optimistic journalist trying to get out there, seeing her superior die in front of her trying to save them, and like all of this shit come crumbling down, that there is something in her that changes into the more cynical, business focused, still with a sense of humor to some extent, but like something in her has to change. And hopefully, whereas like she might come down and kind of regain some of that less anime like sense of being, that hopefully that allows other characters to open up more to fill in that, because that is sort of Vash's whole thing. And hopefully this is what recognizes that. Like what is it to be human? It's Meryl banging on the glass even when they're saying there's no point, there's no reason to do that. She's gonna keep doing her damnedest, and that's what works.
I hope
that
you're
there
right.
is that idea of you just keep going that Vash has had as the sad boy side, but I'm hoping comes out in the, but it could also be the more jovial, happy-go-lucky side. You just keep going, and that's all you can do, despite the world going to shit around you.
I'm not gonna go against what you said, because I hope you're right, and I leave it at that.
Me too. Yeah. I hope I'm right.
I do want to talk about, last thing before we wrap up here. I want to talk about the character designs. As much as I like them, I also hate them.
It's kind of League of Legends, isn't it?
It's a lot League of Legends. It's way K-pop.
But I'm kind of into most of them.
Yeah, I think Trigun 98 rode this line of spaghetti. People dressed either like they're in an anime, and those characters were either awesome for the wrong reasons, or they're legato and they suck ass, or they dressed like they lived in the Old West, right? There's a lot of ponchos, there's a lot of hats, vest, bolo ties.
Bolo tie.
Right. The reason Vash looks the way he does is because he's the only character who gets to ride that complete perfect line between Western and anime. And his mechanical arm is very well integrated into his jacket. You don't realize that's part of his jacket until there's the reveal. His wrist drops and he shoots a guy, which is badass.
Right.
Right. Whereas I don't like the K-pop versions of these characters, A, because they all look flimsy to me, and B, because they look impractical. Vash the Stampede, first name Vash, middle name The, last name Stampede, wears black jeans and a puffer jacket, and he lives in the desert. His mechanical arm is attached to the jacket. He can't take that jacket off, y'all. That's just attached on the outside.
It's stuck.
It's stuck. No, that jacket is attached to that man. He can't take it off.
Yeah.
And he is hot. He is dying. Why are you dressed like that? Meryl, they got me doing it again because I miss my girl. Meryl is dressed like a school child. She's got a stupid little hat on. And then fucking, I don't know, Wolfwood just has high waters on.
Which do look pretty cool.
Yeah, Wolfwood just
My man's got his Toms on in the desert.
Right.
Do you expect anything less?
Yes, I expect a lot more. I didn't mention how I don't like what they did to his character, because being a priest is a big part of his character. When you boil that down to just, quote, the Punisher, the Undertaker, there's no depth there. He's just...
And there's no gong, and there's no lightning, and there's no cane, so what's the point if you're gonna call him the Undertaker?
No, I think they did do him pretty dirty, because I was sort of going like, we got a great introduction to him, and I really did love his just sort of, what am I supposed to say again?
I hated that.
Like, I miss the, like, he carries a little confessional with him and tries to make a quick buck off of that. I do miss that side of him, but I also really enjoyed that. Like a little more cynical, a little less preachery, but then we never just did anything. We never did anything with him afterwards to kind of make up for that. And then he got sidelined with Meryl that I was just sort of like, what are you doing here still?
All right,
God
Nick,
damn
I'll
it.
see you later. I guess you'll die in the second season. No, and that, we'll use this as the wrap-up point. That is my main issue with Trigun Stampede, is that they genericized it. They took all these characters and put them to their most digestible seasonal anime. Come the spring, you won't be thinking about this anymore until next year when we announce season 2 for winter 2024. Right. How do I want to say this? Do I think Stampede is better than 98? No. Do I think Trigun Stampede is bad? No. I think it's good.
Right.
No, sincerely. After all of this stuff, I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's just standard. It is bog standard.
It's your first anime, whereas 98 is your second anime.
Yeah, this is a classic 6 out of 10. I watched it once and then I'll never think about it again, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not something I value.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn this into I value one version of Trigun more than the other, because I think we do that too much in this podcast.
That's how you get siblings that have a murder streak for one another. You don't want to pick one over the other.
Yeah, I just think that in Kaylie bringing up this is a setup to a second season is something I didn't see in the moment, which I hope you're right, and I hope Stampede got enough traction to where you can be right. Is my biggest thing.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think there was a tweet not too long ago. Like Trigun Stampede came out in January of this year. I don't remember if it like had rolling episodes or if it just all dropped at once. I don't remember.
It released once a week. It just ended at the time we're recording this 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Studio Orange was sort of teasing the possibility of like the finish, the wrap up, final phase coming soon was tweeted on March 25th. So it sounds like, and they have the updated poster with the $60 billion double dollars. So my fingers crossed,
my boy's name.
Knock on wood, that we are going to get that final phase. Maybe it's another 12 episodes that tie us over into the Trigun 98, like what we know of that story, while also finally bringing pieces of the manga in that haven't been able to get their due diligence.
Into the manga stuff rather than what
now that there's actually an ending to be able to do.
Well, not only that, but I think you've used too many pieces of 98 that you said happened before July. Because
right, like we got a lot of we got our Nebraskas, we got other just sort of moments that were kind of
Nebraskas.
My boys got nerfed. But my boy got nerfed.
They did. No, that there were some things that, and I think that's kind of the interesting way that they tell the story and why I was excited for this. Like again, I don't think they're necessarily like one is better than the other, but I really liked this, especially coming from watching 98, because there's things that you can recognize, and I don't know if you'll necessarily catch all of clearly if you haven't watched it, you won't know one thing from the other.
Mhm.
But I mean thematically and like what things represent, what a character kind of becomes about, what their focus is, all these little motifs and details. There's a lot more, I think, that's worth noticing what gets put into conversation in Stampede, because it is able to take those pieces from 98 as well as the manga and run it between a cohesive plot, even if it's not either one of those sources, and actually ask some really exciting questions, like still a little eco-earth, like save the earth, like eco questions, Wall-E, like those kind of things. But I think it also goes a level deeper that 98 wasn't able to do. Like 98 asked some deep questions, but in a different vein. Whereas here, it's putting those two sides of the equation actually into a really nice conversation and kind of leaving you with that, like, it can't be optimistic, unfortunately. We want it to be. There's always people that want it to be. Like, Meryl and Rem are our sources of optimism in the face of tragedy. But we can't ignore the fact that death is coming for us, that we live in a wasteland, that we are killing each other over resources. How do you fix that? So I really like what Stampede is able to do as like a story filled with these kind of dynamic characters and questions. And I hope we get more and we stop nerfing characters and whatever this next phase includes. We'll see.
Gibby, last thoughts.
I think, yeah, if you don't have any prior knowledge of it, of 98, it's a fine show. And there's a lot of people that enjoy it. My problem is just that with the knowledge that I have, which I just can't put to the side, it's too difficult to do. I think this is a show that plays some of its cards a little too early, and we don't get to appreciate and wait for some big reveals and to really get the emotional impact that it could, even outside of, 98. Looking at it just in and of itself, I think you take something like Vash's mechanical arm, like Wolfwood's being part of the cult of knives and all that. We learn that so quickly, and we kind of have to with a 12 episode structure instead of a 20 or a 25 episode structure. I think that limits the possibilities and the impact of a lot of the moments that we have inside the show. And because of that, and because it has been homogenized to better represent everything that is around it, I just don't get the impact from this show as a story that I could if it's given more time to be able to breathe and pace itself. I think
let him cook. That's the
cook.
moral of the story. Let him cook.
Yeah, and also their haircuts are dumb.
Their haircuts are stupid.
But I do like at the last episode, we get that nice, like, and that's why I'm also hopeful is like we're tying in the familiar elements at the end so much that they went, yeah, we're changing the hair design just for the last episode.
But they
Here
could
you
have had
go.
that the whole
Here's
time.
your spiky boy.
They could have had that the whole time, and they chose to wait on it, and it felt like dumb prequel shit that people do with sad prequels all the time, and I'm mad about it. Ugh. This show made me sad a lot, and I don't like
The show's
that.
very sad.
I don't want to be sad.
I don't.
I miss my Bugs Bunny boy.
Yeah. No, and I hope my headcanon currently is that we will pick up like clearly with the Eric's art. Like maybe Meryl and Millie are out on the job and they bump into this guy
As
and Meryl's
reporters.
like, no, I fucking know him. I fucking know him. He's Vash the Stampede. No, he's not. Vash the Stampede is so-and-so. Like, that's how we get that in there of this denial. And no, it's him is because he's no longer Vash the Stampede. And that we do get him out of that slump, that depression. And that rejuvenates hopefully the youth in that, like, this is the man running around going, this world is made of love and peace and eating donuts.
Oh, yeah.
That's all we can hope for. And maybe Knives is or isn't dead. Who fucking knows? We just saw a skeleton vanish into space. He's probably not dead. We still didn't even get introduced to, like, the full, like, gung-ho guns and all of that.
Yet.
So,
because they don't exist. They went with dumb cult.
I know. Again, we've got potential.
Let them kill this episode off already.
Just picture me as Charlie Day with all these red threads. I see the pieces coming together, god damn it.
Pepe Sylvia.
But yeah, dude, that has been this episode of the Liberal Artist Podcast. Thank you for joining us so much. Follow us on socials at LibArtistPod on the Twitters and the Instagrams. I've become 80. Join us next time when we write sad boy music.
I'm not allowed to feel sad. I don't deserve to feel sad boy hours.
Peace.
The Liberal Artists Podcast premieres every other Thursday on your favorite podcasting platform. The show is hosted by Bodio and Kaylie Horowitz, and Andy Gibson. You can find the show at LibArtistsPod on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks to White Hot for performing the theme song Reflect, which can be found on freebeats.io. Now, I'm off to go exploring, and maybe, just maybe, I'll find a sheep that I can call my own. Good day.
So more lore. The main setting point, or the main act for Knives is, you know what? Never mind, because that's not relevant to what we're talking about, because they don't mention it in Stampede. Cut that.
Get it out of here.
Yeah, especially if you're gonna slap your mic around. Stop playing the bongos.
Bongo cat.
A little auditory for the audience. No.
Welcome to my ASMR channel.
Thanks for an easy stinger, everybody.